Hello everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back, and today is the start of a very interesting reading vlog. I feel like fall is everybody's favorite season on BookTube, and I get it. I'm right there with them. Fall is one of my favorite seasons, and with that, you see a lot of people creating fall or autumn themed or even spooky themed reading TBRs or recommendation videos. And so my goal is to try and find the ultimate fall and autumn read, because I want to make recommendation videos too, but I'm just really bad at them. I'm really bad at thinking of books. I don't know, I just can't really look at my bookshelf and see any books that I would really recommend for fall. I would say that the closest book that's really jumping out to me as a fall read, specifically a fall read, would be Cemetery Boys. But again, it doesn't have the fall atmosphere. It has the fall spooky, vibes, but it doesn't have like the fall leaves. And then the other book I think of is Payback's a Witch. Again, has the fall vibes, definitely has that cozy Halloween town atmosphere, but I didn't love that book, and I don't know why. I think it was just because it was a straight romance, and I just don't love romance. So I'm looking for my perfect fall book, and just good fall books in general so that I can read them, love them, recommend them, all that jazz. So what I did first was compile a list of buzzwords that I think of when people talk about fall and talk about fall books. We have school setting or dark academia. School setting makes sense. Fall takes place around the time that people start school, and there's just something so cozy about fall and school, at least for me. I always dream about being like at Oxford or like a college where you have those cathedral-like buildings, lots of wood, lots of books surrounding you, kind of gray, beautiful, kind of creepy, foggy, rainy weather. And with school settings, the new hit trend right now is dark academia. And in my opinion, I love the dark academia aesthetic, and I really like books that do dark academia well. So for instance, when I'm thinking of dark academia, I'm not just thinking of the creepy, beautiful, haunting school. I'm also thinking about the characters fitting into this world, not fitting into the society, the kind of critique of academia itself. So like the kind of awe and love of the pretentious and the beautiful setting and all that, but also critiquing it. Just something about that dynamic really works for me. Another buzzword, of course, is atmospheric vibes, which I've already been discussing. The smell of the fall leaves, the little bit of decay smell, the smell of rain and fog, the kind of just beautiful scenery, the really beautiful prose that describes the scenery. Lots of weather-related stuff is another buzzword, weather. And with these buzzwords, we kind of have a lot of opposites. We have cozy, but we also have dark and spooky. We have like architecture, beautiful buildings, but also like deep forest. We have gothic settings, but we also have witchy vibes. It's very much like beautiful dark school castle setting versus like living in a cottage in the woods. Like those two things both mean fall to me. They're just very different vibes. It's a spectrum of fall. And with these kind of dark spooky vibes, with this cozy setting, what you're getting is a lot of slow-paced plot and a lot of slow revealing plot, and with that, character-focused stories. So from buzzwords, I started to think about the genres of the fall book. You get a little horror, of course, whether that be gothic horror, straight-up horror, whatever. It fits into the Halloween time as well. You have a lot of mystery thrillers, again, fitting into the spooky vibes. And I could also see a lot of mystery thriller type stuff with this darker school setting, or just fitting in with a more literary book, because that's another thing about the fall read. A lot of them I do feel like are literary leaning, and even maybe literary historical, maybe classics, which again is going back to the dark academia thing. But I feel like the fall book can also be a fantasy, a high fantasy book, or even a paranormal fantasy. Witches, vampires, all of that. It fits into Halloween, but it also fits into the vibes of fall. So it's kind of hard, because I would love a book that actually takes place during fall, that has the fall feels and like talks about the leaves and all that, but I also just want the vibes, the atmosphere, the darkness that gives me that fall feeling, whether it be in fall or not. But to me, a lot of these dark atmospheric fantasy books that I think of are either like high summer fantasy books or they're winter fantasy books. Like for instance, The Bear and the Nightingale, that is distinctly a very wintry series to me. Whereas Spinning Silver, deeply winter. Uprooted, I feel like is deep summer, like that deep, oppressive hot summer going into fall. So the next thing I did after thinking about genre, thinking about buzzwords, is I went and didn't watch, but compiled a bunch of booktubers' fall and autumn recommendation videos to watch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down all the books they talk about, maybe a couple words about why they recommended it, whether it be a buzzword kind of thing or if it's a genre. So what I think I'm going to try and do is count the buzzwords that I'm seeing, as well as count and make a graph of the different genres that I'm seeing and kind of the pie chart of that. And I'm also, of course, going to write down the books and see which ones pop up the most. So what I'm going to do once I gather these statistics is that I'm planning on reading a couple of the recommended books, as well as just trying to figure out the vibes of the fall book and pick some of my own choices based on books that I already want to read. This is going to be a lot of work, but I'm really excited for it. And these are the things that I'm kind of expecting to see on people's lists. I'm going to expect to see bigger tomes, maybe classics again. I think it's going to be either middle grade or adult leaning, very much adult leaning. I don't think we're going to see a lot of YA. We'll see some, but I don't think we're going to see a bunch. Middle grade, I do think will pop up, like I said, because a lot of middle grade has that very whimsical atmospheric vibe, which will fit into the fall aesthetic, into the, like, that cozy aesthetic. But again, I do think it's going to be more adult leaning, because when I think of like the fall book, I'm thinking of very heavy prose, very slow paced, which again leans more into an adult book. I think we might see a possible style over substance problem, which again is leaning into too purple of prose, where the style of the book is going to overtake like the actual plot and substance. If I don't like a book, I think that's where most of the problems are going to lie, is with a style over substance kind of thing. And the other thing I think we're going to see a lot is a darker tone and darker themes. Again, with dark academia, I think to make a good dark academia book, it has to have those darker critiques, those darker themes. And again, if we're getting horror, if we're getting mystery thriller, it's going to cover darker topics. So I tried to compile a lot of different kinds of booktubers, mostly stuck with people that I have watched in the past, who I'm currently subscribed to, as well as people that I recognize. Not that I don't trust any other people's things out there, but I wanted to pick people that I'm already familiar with. I wouldn't necessarily say like the most popular booktubers, maybe it is, I don't know. But I tried to pick those kind of people who are trusted by the community to give good recommendations. I try to pick people also that look different, have different backgrounds, because I think one of the biggest problems that we could see is definitely a problem that I saw when I was scrolling through, is that the fall aesthetic, the dark academia aesthetic, it is very much a white woman author kind of thing. That's one of the things I think we'll see a lot, is a lot of female white authors, a lot of female white straight authors. And going back to the style over substance, it's like the atmosphere over like the themes and real existent reality of like having a dark academia setting. So I tried to pick booktubers that are from all different types of backgrounds, so that we're not seeing just all white women and we're not seeing dark academia without the dark critique of academia. So that's the balance I kind of tried to go for. But I want to be very upfront about that. Like, I love the aesthetic of dark academia, of fall, of all of that, but we need to be very honest about like aesthetics and kind of some of the mindsets that go along with aesthetics and the things that we kind of let slip by because of aesthetics. Like, I'm not going to be reading a Donna Tartt book anytime soon. I don't care if they're great. I'm just not super interested in them, and I've read enough POC reviews to know that they don't necessarily like how Donna Tartt handles racism and LGBT themes. And that's okay. We can find a fall book that fits all of the fall coziness, but doesn't abandon style for substance, which doesn't abandon real themes for aesthetics. It's out there. I'm gonna find it, and I'm excited for this video. So now it's time to research. So hello and welcome back to the fall reading vlog. It feels like it's been a while for me because it took me a while to compile and make these statistics, and also I am extremely busy somehow, and I have like all these random reading plans now that I want to get done by the end of the year. All these projects, which is like, this is the worst time to be doing this to myself, but whatever. So let us get into my findings for this reading vlog. So the first thing I did was I basically watched every single video that I put on this little TBR list for myself. It ended up being 14 videos. Some of them were from the same creator, so I combined those, and then some of them just didn't end up being super relevant, so I nixed them. So we ended up with like 11-ish videos that I compiled together, some with creators that I've seen before, some that I've just seen around, and then some that are new to me but had an interesting looking video. So I tried to get get a wide array of people that I knew had been interested in, and people with very different reading tastes. There were a couple outliers, but for the most part, people had very somewhat similar vibes, genres, words that they were using. So the first thing I did was watch each video, and then I wrote out all the buzzwords that they were using throughout the video, and then I wrote out all the recommendations, as well as why they were recommending it, what genre they were recommending it for, any buzzwords that I was seeing, and I compiled this into a big Microsoft document, went through it, and put if I had read it, if I was interested in it, if I had it on my TBR already, just kind of touching base with the books that I had. And from there, I created a spreadsheet with every single book that was recommended. And again, I went through and was like, how many times was this book recommended? Have I read this? Is it on a TBR? Am I interested in it just by those people's descriptions and their recommendations? So I was left with a list of 141 books. Some of them I have read and some of them I have not. But before we get into the books themselves, let us get into the buzzwords. So I took the buzzwords and I created a word cloud for them. The words are repeated throughout the word cloud because that's just how they create it when you don't have enough words. But by the size of the word, you can tell just how many times things were mentioned. So the big word we had was cozy and dark, and then we got vibes, spooky, weather, atmospheric, and then you can see some other words like magical, witchy, occult, dark, weird, creepy, eerie, strange. There were school a lot. Whimsical was a fun one. Aesthetic, wholesome came up. So it's a very interesting dichotomy again. You're getting the cozy, the whimsical kind of vibes, but you're also getting the dark, the atmospheric, the weather-based thing, the school, the eerie, the spooky. It's a very interesting mix of words. So let us get into the genres that were recommended. So I made a little pie chart to make this easy to look at. This might be a little bit off because I did do just like a quick numerical counting kind of thing. But for the most part, you can see 78 books were magical or fantastical. This could be sci-fi as well. I just kind of lumped all of the speculative, fantastical, magical books together. So that was the major chunk of the pie chart. From there, mystery, thriller, and horrors took up another really big chunk. So horrors at 20 and mystery thrillers at 17. But you can kind of lump them together and think of them as one kind of big section of the pie chart. So mostly magical fantasy, but horror, mystery, thriller, that also makes up a big section. And from there, classics had 9, literary fiction or historical was 8, and then other, which would be like contemporary, really, really heavy, hard sci-fi, or just like random things like poetry, I guess, I don't know, nonfiction, that ended up as other. And a lot of those were like outliers that I wouldn't necessarily count as a good fall recommendation, I would say, like some weird summary contemporaries and romance and stuff. So for the most part, most of my genres split up exactly how I thought it would, and we saw a lot of the same buzzwords again that I thought I would. So let us get into the books. So of the books I was recommended, these were the books that I was recommended more than once. So they were recommended 2 times to me, and of those I have read 3 of them. This is actually inaccurate. I have actually read 4 of these. I've also read Vicious by V.E. Schwab.
So I must have been really tired when I made this or something because I've also read Frankenstein.
And then on this chart, you can see the books that were recommended more than twice. So these were recommended 3 or 4 times. So we got The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is no surprise. Ninth House, again, not a big surprise. Dorian Gray was a very popular classic fiction, which I was surprised by. I thought it would have been Jane Eyre up there, but it must have only been recommended once because I don't see it on the chart of books that were recommended multiple times. Truly Devious, that makes sense for booktubers. And then Atlas 6, again, makes sense, especially when I was doing all the ones that were from this year. And then The Raven Boys. To me, The Raven Boys is an interesting pick. I think I'm alone in this because it seems to be a very popular fall pick, but to me, The Raven Boys screams like deep, oppressive summer. It starts on All Saints Day and it goes an entire year back to All Saints Day again. I'm pretty sure it's an entire year that in those 4 books. And for me, the like deep forest setting just gives me very like deep oppressive summer vibes. And I would say oppressive summer is very similar to fall, like that tension, that like whimsical magicalness, but I would say like deep summer is like slightly different feeling. I don't know if that makes sense because deep summer is a very specific thing that I think of when I think of seasons. If this vlog goes well, I will do one for every season, and when we get to summer, we will talk about about the different genres or feelings that I feel during summer and what oppressive summer is. But I guess, yeah, The Raven Boys, it's whimsical, it's slightly occult. I guess people see it as a fall book, which makes some sense, I guess. So from those lists, the 141 books, but also the books that appeared multiple times, I created a TBR for myself. So this is the TBR. Honestly, narrowing it down to these 15 books was very difficult. There were just so many books on the TBR that I wanted to read, as well as other books that I thought were really comparable and would have been great reads as well. So beyond thinking about the 141 books that were picked, as well as the books that were picked multiple times, I was also thinking about the genre thing. So I tried to pick slightly more whimsical fantasy, that kind of vibe, but I also wanted to pick a pretty big section of mystery, thriller, horror stuff to kind of balance that out to reflect the pie chart, as well as like some literary stuff, some classic stuff. And I would say one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of these are like genre bending or genre overlaying. Like there's a lot of classics that are classic horror, classic fantasy, and there's a lot of literary fiction that also lean into the horror, lean into the mystery thriller, lean into the fantastical. So we have Dowry of Blood, which is horror, fantastical. We have Villoletta. This is one of my picks. Again, Jane Eyre was on there at least once. And there were some other classics that were recommended. I think I had read all of the classics that were recommended, or at least most of them. And I honestly just want to read another Charlotte Bronte because she is the Gothic queen. I really like Jane Eyre, so I've always wanted to read something else by her. So I thought Villoletta was a perfect choice to put on there. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife is like a mystery thriller, I think. We Are Villains is another horror, but I think it leans mystery thriller-y and literary as well. We have Night Circus, which I don't think is literary, but it has like a literary vibe with like the writing. The Witch Boy is one of my picks. There were at least a couple comic and graphic novel recommendations, but I had read almost all of them. So I was looking for something comparable that had like that witchy, Halloween-y vibe, but also like the wholesomeness, and so I picked Witch Boy. Sawkill Girls was recommended once, I believe, but it's a book that I really want to read. It's YA, it's horror, it's sapphic. Then we have the Atlas 6, which is very popular right now, feeds into the dark academia, and it's fantastical. Mexican Gothic, very popular, literary, horror-y kind of stuff. It's horror, but it is always categorized at the fiction section in Barnes & Noble, so that's why I think of it as literary leaning. I've read one of her books before and I really enjoyed it, so this is a good pick. When No One Is Watching is another like literary, horror-y kind of book, and honestly, I will be real. I'm not interested in a ton of the thriller, mystery thriller type books. I definitely lean more interested into the horror side or into the literary side of that genre. So Mexican Gothic, When No One Is Watching, If We Were Villains, those are the ones that are more interesting to me because they have that more genre bending kind of thing. Plain Bad Heroines is another one that's my pick. I'm surprised I didn't see it on any reading list. It has the dark academia, it has like the historical, it has the horror, it has the sapphic vibes, which just feels very fall to me. Was not there. So I put it on there because I really want to read. Legends and Lattes. That is one of the books that gets into the wholesome-y, cozy vibe. I feel like a lot of these are books you want to read in cozy weather, but are not necessarily books that are cozy themselves. And this one is one of the only ones that fits into actually cozy. Horrid, we got horror. Another one that's similar to Sawkill Girls that is sapphic, horror, YA. So I probably should not pick both of those. Then we got a classic horror, which is The Haunting of Hill House. It's weird because I would say I like horror, I lean into that, but I'm not a big scary person fan. Like I don't like jump scares, I don't like horror movies. I will not go in a haunted maze to save my life. I will not do it. I do not like it. It does not appeal to me, but I do like reading certain type of grotesque-ish horror-y leaning books, I guess. For the final pick, we have Babel, which did appear on multiple lists again, or at least 2 people recommended it. Since it's been a while since I've actually sat down to film this, I have the books already, so let's see from that list what I picked. And there's some chunkers on here, which I'm just not doing myself any favors. So far I have picked 4 books, and that is for multiple reasons. Some of the books that I wanted to read are hard to get, or I couldn't get. I honestly do want to pick one more book, but at the point that we're at now, we have 4 books that kind of fulfill all the categories. So for the mystery thriller / horror, we have If We Were Villains. I see this all the time, always recommended. It has the dark academia thing. I'm interested in this. I want to see what it's about. For my classic literary fiction-y kind of I need to walk around pretentiously with this book, I have Villette by Charlotte Bronte. I saw this in the bookstore and I was like, I cannot pass this by. I absolutely love the cover. I love how it looks. It's stunning. It fits the vibe so well, so I picked it up. So I have one mystery thriller / horror-y kind of leaning book, and I have one gothic literary fiction type leaning book. So to fill out the pie chart correctly for the categories, I need to pick 2 fantasy books, which I did. So I have The Atlas 6 and Babel. Both books I want to read, both books I've been looking forward to, so I could not help myself from putting them on this list and buying them. Again, they both fit into the dark academia thing, and I feel like I'm leaning a little bit too hard into that, honestly, because I didn't necessarily want this to be all dark academia, because we got at least 2 magical schools on here, and a 3rd school if I am correct. I do think I need to pick one more book to even this out, and the book I should pick it should be a cozy one. It should be more of that cute, wholesome-y kind of thing. The Witch Boy is the one I was leaning towards, but I could not find it in stock, and it seems to be temporarily out of stock. I think I could get it on Amazon or somewhere else. That one looks like it will be a little bit difficult to track down. And then the other pick would be Legends and Lattes, but that, again, is another, like, thicker fantasy novel, so I don't know if that's tipping the scale a little bit too much towards the fantasy. But yes, once I finish these 4 books, I do think I need to go back and pick out a fluffy fantasy or just a fluffy, wholesome-y kind of read. But yes, those are all the statistics. I had a really fun time doing it, and I had a really fun time picking out these books. So let's get into actually reading the books and my thoughts and feelings about them, and if they're very fall themed like everybody promised me they would be. So it is October 26th, so we are long overdue for an update on this video. So I'm currently reading The Atlas 6. I honestly can't remember if I said I was going to read that first or not, but that is the first book I chose, and it is the book I'm currently reading. I am right here, so I'm right at the end. I got like 70, 60 pages left of this, so really just the climax of the book. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's going to be somewhere between a 3.75 and a 4-star, and it's a really interesting read. I have been trying to think about like where the author got her influence or inspiration. Definitely literary fiction, darker contemporary fantasy, maybe even urban fantasy. The tropes feel very familiar, but I'm not exactly sure where she's pulling them from. But I also find this book so interesting for a book talk favorite book because I would say it has a lot of tropes, but it also subverts them and plays with them. Like, it doesn't really play into them in an indulgent way. It's very interesting. I am really enjoying this book because it goes in ways that I wouldn't expect it to. And I'm also really enjoying it because it's very slow paced and very focused in on just like what the characters are thinking from moment to moment and them going about this experience of being inside this like magical society or trying to get initiated into this magical society. And we slowly learn their motivations and their personality, but we also don't get a super deep dive into like their personal history. We really have to infer everything just based on the moment to moment scenes that we see them thinking and interacting in. So it's a really interesting book because it's not really plot heavy and we're really focused in on these characters navigating between these different other characters, and we get to see from all 6 different perspectives of the characters. So it's really just really different than what I expected. We kind of learn a little bit about the magic in the world, but again, a lot of it is really inferred. We don't really get to see a ton of how the magic works other than it just kind of working. These are like experts in their craft, so they don't really go into explaining it. They do in some respects, but like the explanations are very metaphysical, philosophical explanations, very much like math and sciencey based. So it's really, really interesting. I also wasn't expecting magical creatures to be a part of this world, but they are. But the other interesting thing with the slow pace of it is that this book happens over an entire year, so we are skipping really big chunks of time. Like, we are really speeding past things and not really settling in one moment. So a lot of times it feels like we're kind of rolling past, I wouldn't say plot points, but we're rolling past things that I would love to see, like just like them studying and like them thinking of theories and stuff. But it is really interesting because these characters are interesting. I like watching them interact. They all have different goals and motivations. Again, because we don't get a lot of depth into who they are and their past, like I really want more. I would say my favorite character, or the character I like following the most, is Parisa. That's how you pronounce her name. I'm not quite sure, but she is the most interesting character to me. And if you haven't read the Atlas 6, Parisa is kind of like the femme fatale. Her superpower is being able to read minds. That's the other interesting thing about the world and the magic. It's like every single character has their own like superpower, like their thing that they specialize in and can do. But it seems like also when you reach a certain threshold of witchiness, or median as they're called in this world, that you can do like basic spells in kind of any field. I'm not really sure how that works, but I'm excited to see the end of this. This is definitely giving me the dark academia, especially because it's touching on kind of a critique of that dark academia. It's giving me the fall coziness, the darky, eerie vibe, and it's giving me the slow-paced and character-focused story. And honestly, I am really enjoying it, and I do think I will continue to read this series because, again, the characters are really fascinating and I want to know more about them. I started filming this video, or started working on this video, a while ago. Just with work and running my accounts and everything, it's taken me a lot longer to get through the Atlas 6 than I thought it would. I want to say it's been like a week and a half since I started reading it, maybe just a week. I don't know. It just feels like I'm reading very slowly because I'm only getting to read like 50 pages in a night. On the first night I read it, I think I read 150 pages, but again, that took me like 4 or 5 hours to read that much. I think that's okay. I don't mind reading at a slower pace. Some books just are a slower read for me, but it's making me a little anxious for what's left in my TBR, especially Babel. So I think I'm gonna have to change gears with this TBR going forward. Villetta and If We Were Villains are going to stay because that makes sense, because they represent different genres, but I think Babel has to go because it is another fantasy novel. I'm sure they're not at all similar, but they have like very similar dark academia, secret society kind of thing. So I think it makes the most sense to put this down, especially because it's such a chunky read. I still am planning on reading it. It's one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I have been really excited to read it, but I think it makes a lot more sense to switch gears to a different fantasy book, especially a fantasy book that's going to give us a very different vibe. So I think for my second fantasy read, to kind of even out the genres and everything, I'm going to be picking up Legends and Lattes. I just saw the UK edition of this book, which is beautiful. It's coming out in November, so I probably won't be able to get it for this video because I'm gonna order it from Waterstone. So I'm gonna rent it from my library ebook style and read it that way, or just buy it online and read it and then rebuy it. But I think that is going to be my second fantasy pick, just to cover a different genre. It's high fantasy, so it's going to be a little bit different, and also cover the coziness that I was looking for. I also got in the mail The Witch Boy, which will be covering my graphic novel, more paranormally kind of section of this TBR, which also hasn't been covered yet. And this will probably end up being the next book I read, just because I know it's going to be quicker and it'll be a good reprieve from such a not long book, but a book that has taken me a while to read. So yes, today I'm going to finish up the Atlas 6, and then I will continue on reading for this reading challenge. But yes, I'm having a good time. It's taking me a while to read, but I am getting the fall vibes. I'm wearing a sweater. It is actually cold outside for Southern California, and by cold I mean it's under 70 degrees. For me, honestly, it feels like Christmas weather out there. Like what I'm used to, like on Christmas Day or like New Year's Day. This is the kind of weather I'm expecting, like 65 to 68 with like a crisp, I don't know how to describe it, but there's like a certain crisp dryness in the air during winter. This is the coldest I've ever had it in October, honestly. Like I could go out trick-or-treating without a jacket on, so like this is a little weird to me, especially in the middle of the day, like it being this cold. Like it's weird. It's still warm enough that I could sit outside in a hammock and be very comfortable. I don't know. I'm loving this fall atmosphere, loving this fall vibes, and so far I'm loving this book, and it is giving me the fallness. Since this book takes place over an entire year, I kind of wish we had more of the fallish feeling when it was fall, like more of the atmosphere and descriptions, but I'm still loving it. But yeah, I will talk to you again once I finish this and we will discuss what happens. So it is the next day and I finished Atlas 6. I think I'm staying around a 3.75
I'm 4-star for that review. I have complicated feelings. Like, I really enjoyed it, but I did feel like things were missing. Like, I wanted more from it. So I'm hoping in the sequel we will get more from it. But today I'm going to start The Witch Boy, but I also have some errands to run. I sold a stack of books from my Pango, so I have to go get to Target to get a box, all of that good stuff. And then I'm going to edit a review and hopefully post that or get that ready to post for tomorrow. So yeah, busy, lots of errands, which is good, keeps me entertained or active, I guess. But I hope to read The Witch Boy today as well, and maybe even start a book, because starting tomorrow I have, I think, 7 full days of work in a row, which isn't that bad because most of my shifts are like 4.5 hours, but like it does considerably take a chunk out of my day, especially when it's late at night, so less time for reading. So I want to be prepared to read for the next 7 days even with work. But yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing. So as you could tell, I'm having a pretty chill Halloween weekend. Mostly it's just work, but I also recently just watched Wendell and Wild, which was a movie I was highly anticipating. I love any kind of animated stop animation kind of stuff. It was really good. It felt really different than anything else I had watched. Like, it felt wholly unique, and I just didn't know what was going to happen next. And I just really liked the aesthetics of it. It just was a really gross but beautiful film. But I also picked up The Witch Boy, which is the second book in this readathon so far. And this is a middle grade graphic novel following a young boy who wants to be a witch, but in his family, women are witches and boys are shapeshifters. And so this mainly covers like what I would say is the coming into power kind of arc, like the origin arc. There are 2 other graphic novels, which I'm assuming are going to be independent events, but still like progressing in our young character's life. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's a pretty contained story, but it does feel like this world is open and interesting enough to keep reading from, and so I'm excited to read more stuff in this series. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It felt very spooky and atmospheric, and it had a little bit of that coziness with like the familial bonds kind of thing. So yeah, this was a pretty good fall read, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So next I am going to pick up a new book to read, and I really have to start picking up the pace because I basically have 2 to 3 novels to read in the next 2 weeks, and I would like to get them finished so that I can actually edit this video and put it out in a timely manner. But yeah, that's what's going on. I have work in an hour, so I'm not going to be doing a lot of reading today. Hopefully I can get some reading done tomorrow. I've just reached the 2nd volume in Valette, which is about 200 pages into the novel. I am enjoying it. I think I'm going to stop it and not continue it or finish it for this reading vlog. There's a big reason why. This is considered a gothic novel. I don't know if that's just the time period or because Charlotte Bronte is the author. I'm sure there are a lot more like academic reasons, but I'm just not going to figure it out right now because I haven't read the whole novel and I don't want to spoil myself. But basically, so far, this is a tale of a young woman who is very passive. She basically has no friends, family, very Jane Eyre-esque like that, and she decides to just leave to this random city in France, becomes a teacher at this school. But unlike Jane Eyre, it is not the same kind of gothic, dark, eerie kind of feeling. As much as I love critiques of Jane Eyre for, you know, how the novel deals with like race, color, Bertha, like, you know, all of that stuff. You know, I love deconstructing Jane Eyre, but also if you're reading Jane Eyre, like, it has that intense, dark, eerie quality to it, like ghosts in the attic. You don't know what's going on. All these weird things are happening. There's like, you know, the eerie fog and like this dark dog coming out of the fog. Like, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that make it cinematic of a read almost and gives it that like creepy, eerie feeling where you're like, what the hell is going on? And this novel just doesn't have that, which isn't a bad thing, but like, it is not a fall read, at least so far. It does not feel like a fall read. It feels like a fall read in the sense that I would look very aesthetic in fall if I was walking around with this in a cute little outfit. Like, there's an aesthetic to the actual reading of the book, but the book itself is not the fall aesthetic. And so because this is a chunky read and it is taking a lot of time to read it, I'm going to set it aside and just focus on the last 2 books that I have for this reading vlog, because I already know that this isn't going to be a good fall recommendation. Because so far, the Atlas 6 and the Witch Boy, I haven't found like a 5-star read yet, but they are very fall. I would definitely recommend them for the fall. They feel that energy. So next we have We Are Villains, and then I'm going to read Legends and Lattes. Honestly, while reading this, all it makes me want to do is read Jane Eyre. I love Jane Eyre. It is such a good novel. So it is November the 6th. As you can see, I have gotten ready, looking nice because I'm going to work. Not at all fall related, but I finally got my little pins in the mail of my Cardcaptor Sakura pins. I have to figure out where I'm gonna put them, but I'm so excited to have them. But the other thing is that, like I said, I put Villette down and now I am reading Legends and Lattes. I just bought the ebook version and I'm using that, and I plan on buying the Waterstones edition, or the British edition, I guess, the hardcover. I just like that cover better, and I like that the original art is still on the inside flap, because I do like it. I just don't love it as a cover. I don't know. I just don't like how it looks in paperback in the US, but I do like the new chalky kind of look of the hardcover, so I'm gonna do that. I'm really enjoying it. I'm almost halfway through it. I started reading it yesterday and was just reading it very, very quickly and really enjoying it. And yeah, it's just really cute, really sweet, very wholesome slice of life, definitely very cozy, and it's making me really hungry. Like, I don't drink coffee, but I want like that kind of Starbucksy beverage, maybe even a hot chocolate, something like that. And I want a cinnamon roll so bad because there's cinnamon rolls in this book and I'm so hungry. It's really good. I really like it. It's not just slice of life. There's like, you know, themes in there as well, characters getting along together. It's just a really good ride, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I was thinking I would. I don't know. I thought it would be bland in some way, or that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I really am. It definitely, if you like slice of life anime, that kind of stuff, this is gonna scratch that itch for you. The only problem, or I'd say the only flaw that I see in this series, is the setting. I think the magical creatures, there are some interesting variations that we don't necessarily have seen or see more original, but the setting feels very, very like basic-y Dungeons and Dragons or like sword sorcery. Like, there is no kind of variation in that, which like isn't like the biggest problem, but I would say my only issue with that is that there's like not a lot to make it very distinct. And then the other thing is that they're going around the city collecting ingredients like cardamom and cinnamon and oranges and stuff. And since we haven't distinguished this city any differently from other Western medieval city, it leads me to think that there's not a lot of like historical accuracy. I would love if there was like some kind of exploration of magic has made it easy along trade routes for different items to be easily traded into cities that wouldn't normally have these ingredients. The spices come from these creatures, and that's why they're really accessible in this city. You know, even though they're expensive, they are still accessible because of these reasons. Like, I wish that kind of information was there. And the other kind of like information I was there, this is like medieval-ish. A lot of people are like common workers, but they have the surplus money to be spending it on like little treats and Starbuckses. And not that like people in those times didn't, but like, this isn't like a feudal society, but like, did they have the time and money to spend on their little treats every day? Just talked a little bit more about the world and society to make some of these things seem at least a little bit more plausible. It seems like they weren't super thought about. Some things were really considered heavily, especially like where the espresso machine comes from and that kind of stuff. This is like a magical world. Why not like play more in it? I just think too heavily about everything when I write, so maybe that's just me. But overall, yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. That's the only kind of critique I have. But besides that, I'm enjoying it a lot, and I'm definitely going to be getting a cozy drink and making cinnamon rolls or something because I have a desire now. But yeah, I definitely think this was a good step. Villette is definitely not reading fall, so it was a good idea to put it down and continue with Legends and Lattes, and then If We Were Villains. So it is now the 9th of November, and last night I did end up finishing Legends and Lattes. I loved it. It was cute, sweet, 3.75 stars, just really good, solid fun fantasy. And I have work in an hour, and I've been spending the morning journaling and just like doing all my little tidbitty stuff to keep me busy. But we are finally coming to the end of this vlog, which means we have If We Were Villains as my last read. I have 30 minutes before I have to start work, so maybe I'll start this. I've started editing the vlog, but I want to do more editing, obviously, because there's gonna be a lot to edit. But yes, it is time for the final fall book. But I would say so far the verdict is in Witch Boy fall book. Atlas 6 fall book. And Legends and Lattes is definitely a fall book for me. Definitely feels very fall. So now it's time to see If We Were Villains. Is it a fall book?
So I started and finished If We Were Villains by ML Rio, and this just ended up being a very fast read for me. I read it in about 2 or 3 days, and so I didn't really have a lot of time or energy to update because I just was focusing so closely on this book and reading it so quickly. So this is definitely not horror. Are some like psychological moments where the characters are like questioning things. So there's like a tinge of it, but it's not horror. And then this is categorized as mystery thriller, but there's not really a big thrill. There's a little bit of mystery, but it's not really thrillery. I would say this definitely falls more into the literary side, and I'm surprised it's not always stocked there. It definitely leans a lot more like literary fiction-y to me, with just like a tinge of the horror, dash of the mystery. But mostly I would say this book is a tragedy, which makes sense because the entire plot revolves around these students at a liberal arts college who are part of the acting program, and all they do is Shakespeare, and so all the characters fit different little archetypes. Not exactly, but they're basically playing out a Shakespeare style tragedy. It's really interesting how the book plays with those things because the character types start to change. They take on different roles. The ending I was a little bit mad at, but then I was thinking a lot about like Shakespeare stuff, going back to my Shakespeare classes that I took in high school and college, and I was like thinking, I'm like, you know, I could really write a really interesting thesis about that ending and how it ties into Shakespeare stuff, so maybe I don't hate it as much as I think I do. But yes, this very much rounds out those categories and genres very, very nicely. It does mean that I did not get as much thriller or horror stuff as I was kind of hoping for this vlog, but it really does make sense for like the fall moods. Not the spookiness of the fall, but just like the fall in general, of getting those like literary with genre leaning type of books. This reminded me a lot of Dead Poets Society, so if you're a fan of that, you might also like this. It also had like the cinematicness. It talked a lot in detail about the changing seasons. This book was very beautifully written as well. I didn't think it was overflowery, but just like the way it wove in different Shakespeare lines and the way it described things was really interesting. I do think this author is really good. I'm surprised they haven't written anything else because this was really enjoyable writing. And the book overall was really, really enjoyable. I really liked this. It's tragic. There are definitely moments that are hard to read, but it made me feel for the characters, even a lot of times when they were a little archetypal, which I think is really interesting. The story is told from a narrator who didn't see everything that happened, from a narrator who's kind of an observer, an outsider, even inside his own group, which just gives a very interesting perspective to the story because he's only seeing a small sliver of things, and he's also only seeing things that he wants to perceive because he knows these people and cares for them, and so has like a little bit of bias towards the events. It was really good. I was really surprised by it. I didn't know what to expect from it, but I really enjoyed it. So let's go over everything that I read for this reading vlog. So first off, I read the Atlas 6, which ended up being a fantastic fall themed book. I gave this a 3.5, 3.75 stars. Really enjoyable, looking forward to the series. Definitely had the vibes and the atmosphere I was looking for fall in the paranormal fantasy kind of deal. Next, I picked up The Witch Boy, which was going for the spooky paranormal vibes, but also the cozy and middle grade demographic, which happens to be a favorite for fall picks, and I really enjoyed this. It's a graphic novel, really fun. I gave it a 4-star. After that, I started Villette by Charlotte Bronte, and of course I haven't finished this. It was enjoyable, but it was not giving me the fall vibes like Jane Eyre, so I put this down. This is more for aesthetics than actual fall substance, I would say. After that, I read Legends and Lattes, which I gave a 3.75 stars to. Really enjoyable, really fun. High fantasy gave us that coziness. And then finally we concluded with If We Were Villains, which is technically in between literary and mystery thriller. And again, it gave me those fall vibes. So overall, we have our two fantasies, we have the middle grade graphic novel, classic, and we have like a literary mystery thriller. So all in all, I think we covered a lot. The fall kind of recommended books, and these are all books that I would definitely recommend for the fall. Well, besides Villette, but you know, these plus Legends and Lattes are all books I would recommend for the fall, for cozy, spooky, seasony. It gets the dark, the atmosphere, but also the coziness, also like the atmosphericness, the eeriness. I think these are great picks. And we know that If We Were Villains, as well as The Atlas Six, and I think Legends and Lattes were all on recommendation lists, so people understand what they're talking about when they're talking about fall recommendation videos. They are giving good recs. So let's see now if I can pick some books from my shelf that are also great fall books. So for a comp title for Witch Boy, if you're looking for another spooky comic, of course we have Mooncakes. This again has that cozy fall vibe, but it has paranormal elements to it like the witches, so a little bit of spookiness as well. And it's also queer, which is a great bonus. And then getting into young adult books. For horror and mystery thriller, I would do Ace of Spades. This takes place at a school, so it has that school setting that a lot of people are recommending. This is really, really dark, covers really dark topics, really heavy themes of racism, bullying, and homophobia, but it's a really excellent written book, and it's great for fans of horror that also need the thematicness to back up the horror. Going into paranormal, we of course have The Raven Boys. I again think this is summery, but most people do not agree with me. I think that the spin-off series is much more fall vibes, but of course you need to read this to read the fall vibes. Another fall book I would do is The Hazelwood. It's set in our world, but then there's travel into like a fantastical fairy tale-esque realm. A lot of people don't like this book. I really like it. The main character is really bitchy and mean. I think that fits like a fall personality really well, and I really like this. I need to reread it maybe, but I definitely would recommend this. It definitely feels very fall to me. And rounding out the YA, we also have Legendborn, which again has that school, dark academia, secret society type thing, but there's also magic and mystery. It's really character driven as well. It's very close to Bree and her experiences. Again, there is like racism and a lot of themes centering around that. So it is a lot darker in tone, but I think it is worth the read. It's really excellently done, and I can't wait to read the sequel. Going into adult fantasy, we of course have the Gideon the Ninth series, necromancy, lesbians in space, definitely a very dark gothic-y tone with sci-fi and fantasy elements. This series definitely feels very spooky season to me, very fall, so definitely recommend this series. And then rounding out that category, we have Middle Game, which is like paranormal-ish. It has, again, that lyrical, beautiful writing. This story is about twins that are separated and they have almost superpower-like intelligence and end up having, I think they have certain powers to them as well. But this novel, really, really enjoyable. I read most of this book while I was walking around Central Park and then walking around the Met, so I don't know, something about New York gives me those kind of fallish vibes, so this is definitely a mood, definitely a vibe, definitely fits into fall. And then going into horror and literary, of course, have The Only Good Indians, which is a horror novel. And this is about a group of men that are Native American, and they have like this traumatic event that happens in their past, and so they're trying to put that behind them now, but the past is catching up with them. I don't read a lot of horror. This freaked me out a little bit, but I did enjoy it, and it is a horror I would recommend. It was really excellently done. Sticking with horror, we have Bunny by Mona Awad. This definitely has like that gory, spooky time vibes to it. Again, it happens at a college, and it's basically all about this young woman who is finishing out her master's program and some weird stuff that happens with some of the other master's students. This happens in like a creative writing program as well for the MFA. This made me feel things when I was reading it because I was reading it in my final year of getting an MFA. It's horror, it's weird, but it captured something of what I was feeling at that time. Definitely recommend. It's horror, it's literary, it's an interesting time. And then finally, to round out that category, we have Catherine House, which again happens at a school. There's mysterious things going on. It has a little bit of the gothic, a little bit of the like psychological what is going on kind of thing. It's weird, but again, very enjoyable and very creepy. So those are the books that I read for my fall reading video. Let me know some of your fall recommendations down in the comments. we're wrapping up fall very quickly and we're going into Christmas and winter very, very soon. So I hope to see you again for another seasonal video. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and happy reading.